like I said before, the 6 layers here is a framework that you can use to build production grade AI systems. Either you're building it into your existing backend systems or you're starting afresh to build a new backend system that needs AI integration. So you already understand what I mean by AI integration. So it can either be you're building a rack system or you're building an AI agent or you're building any backend systems that need AI integration. Okay, so you can use these 6 layers to actually do it professionally and production grade. So here, while we were trying to build the mock interview platform into Mastering Backend, of course, my team and we went out to source for the knowledge by watching tutorials, taking courses, and all of that, and then we were set to build out this platform. Of course, after 2 weeks, we were able to build out something. It was working perfectly on our local host. But then when we deploy it to production, to a real environment, we started noticing different failures. I actually noted 3 of them, but there were a lot of failures that happened because we were not able to do some things right. So the first one is this. We had $400 overcharge. The reason why that happened is because a user asks the AI agent a few questions that the agent wasn't sure of the answer. Okay, so we're actually checking some of the answers that is passing through, from LLMs in case there is any instance of hallucination, right? So there is somehow the user asks a question or the user makes some sound that wasn't a real question or whatever. And then you notice that our agents keep looping and repeating and checking each time to get the correct answer. And that's actually racked up our API cost. And we woke up to like a $400 charge on our API calls. So that was one notable failure that we had. And we had to now discover that, okay, for us to build this thing professionally, there are systems that we need to put in place. There are mechanisms that we need to put in place so that we do not have these kind of failures again. So imagine that we were not able to see this and then we waited for like maybe 5 days or something. You notice that we would have incurred a higher amount. And then we also have a case where the AI answered a question wrongly based on what the user sent. And then the user actually tweeted that. And that was a blow on our face because we want these people to come and practice an interview. And then they came in, asked their question, they provide their job description and all of that. And instead of the AI to generate questions based on the JD that the user has provided, you notice that the AI hallucinated at some point, and that resulted to the user actually posting that on social media. Okay, so this thing of hallucination has to be checked properly if you're going to create a production ready system so that you do not kind of have this kind of issue if you're building a very high end AI system or backend system that is used by top companies and all of that. You do not want to have this kind of issue. So, for example, you could have an issue where a user is asking for your refund policy or something, and then the AI is generating another set of answers. So you notice that that wouldn't be good for the user experience at that time. Okay, so another issue that we noted was memory leak. So what happens here is that we are running a mock interview platform where people have to ask series of questions, and then there will be like backlog of conversations and all of that. So we had a situation where these users spent about 60 minutes going back and forth with this AI, and then that's resulted to a longer conversational histories. And we had a problem with memory leaks because the conversation was too long for it to fit into this specific size that we've specified for it. Okay, so these failures that I have listed out is something that we experience personally, right? So tutorials will not teach you this. They will not go into this depth to show you that these things like this actually happens. Because if you do not check them properly, let's say you just follow through with the knowledge that you have from the tutorials that you've watched, or the courses that you've seen. Okay, you will not be able to check this and prevent things like this because they are not being taught in these courses. These courses, they just want you to understand how to call the open AI, and then you are okay with it. It gives you a response. Sometimes the response that it gives you is not actually what you want. Even if at that first instance it gives you the correct response, there will be many cases, assuming you have 1 million users, interacting with your LLMs or interacting with your agent, for example, there will be some instance where the response will not correspond with what you're actually expecting. So you need to catch all these scenarios. And that is my story. This story basically gives birth to these frameworks that I want to talk about in this session. Okay. But before we go into that, there are a series of questions that we have to ask ourselves after we had those problems. So the first one is, what would really happen if the API times out? So if you are trying to call OpenAI API, and then it loads for some reasons. Maybe there is a network failure for a particular user, and then the API times out. What do you want to happen? What should happen? The tutorials that you watch may not go into depth to show you how you can handle this kind of error. So the best thing that I think that they will show you is to just put in try catch block and then catch the exception and maybe show it to the user of something. But there should be a mechanism for you to actually mitigate these kind of problems and these kind of errors. All right. So the next one is, what happens when the cost actually spike? So in our case, you notice that we did not have it in mind that our cost was going to spike. For example, we did not know that there would be a user that would ask a kind of question that our LLM will have to repeat itself in order to get the answers and stuff like that. We did not factor that into the products that we were building. All right. And that actually cost us to pay more money than we actually budgeted for. Okay. Factors like these are things that you need to consider. Factors like these are things that you need to put in place when you're actually trying to build a production ready AI systems. Then the next one is, what happens when the model hallucinates? Okay, when a user asks a set of questions that your LLM is not able to answer, correctly, we all know that the LLM is going to try to generate a response. So even if that response doesn't match what you're looking for or what the answer is supposed to be, there will definitely be a response, right? So how do you check through these responses and make sure that the response that you are getting or the response that goes to the user is actually what you expected as the creator of that particular agent? Okay, so you need to put all these into consideration when you're building your production ready AI systems. And then another one is, when you want to debug, if there's a problem, how do you actually debug it? How do you trace the errors? Okay, how do you know where the error happens? And the issues that we listed, we had to take down the products, take down the product and try to rebuild it again in order to catch these bugs, because we did not do proper monitoring and observability on the parts of the AI. All right. So we did not do that because we were following through with a tutorial and a course that we watched. Okay. We were following through that and we were not able to actually check and put this system in place for things like this, because we did not even know that things like this are going to actually happen. Okay. Another one is, what happens when the output is dangerous? Okay. So aside from hallucination, when a user actually asks a question, sometimes depending on what the user is asking, the output can be dangerous to you, the business owner, because the AI can actually share a private information or a confidential data to the user. So what happens if something like that is about to happen? How do you check it? How do you make sure that confidential information do not pass through your code to become the response to the user? So you have to, if you want to actually build a production ready AI system. So another one is, what happens when the context is too long? So if you have to put in lots of documents, okay? So many documents that describe your business, so many documents that talks about how you handle processes, your SOPs, your vision, mission, all these different documents are going to be rack system. And sometimes that context can be too long. So how do you break it down into pieces? What are some of the strategies that you're going to use that suits your business, that suits the kind of documents that you have? Okay. We have to think through those strategies and be able to come up with something perfect that is unique to your own business, right? And the last one here is what happens when users try to abuse your system. So if a user tries to like send some prompts that would warrant the AI or your agents to bring out some, dark things about your company or some confidential information. How do you prevent stuff like this? Okay, so these are some of the questions that we've pointed out. But of course, depending on your business or your use cases, you could have different questions that you need to answer for yourself and then think through how you need to solve them. Okay, and the 6 layers is going to actually help you, solve this kind of problem. So let's take a look at it. So here are the 6 layer framework. And it is important that you follow through in order. You don't skip any steps so that you don't miss on the important things that you're supposed to actually handle. So we have foundation, we have business logic, we have production hardening, and then we have AI infrastructure, and then we have AI systems, and then the last one we have defense. So defense is not that important, but is also necessary for it to be there. And then the most important one here is, foundation, business logic, production handling, and then bringing in your AI infrastructure. So the foundation here is the first step. It basically talks about you as a backend engineer. So if you say you're a backend engineer, you should already be familiar with authentication, database schema, validation, different config environments, and a lot of security things that you normally do for your backend system. So you should already be familiar with that. And we are going to look at some of the questions that you need to answer if you are still at the foundation level. And it's very important because this is the base that you have to set for your AI system to rest upon. Okay, so if the base is not secure, then your AI systems or your AI integrations are not going to be secure. And then the next one, we have business logic. So at this moment, this is where you actually define the business logic that you're building, with this AI system. So here, since you are building a mock interview platform, we have to do things that relate to mock interview platform. Our backend system has to be structured as we are building a mock interview platform. So we need to set role-based access control. We need to, come up with queuing mechanisms. We need to send jobs with like loop events or any other one, depending on the language that you're using. We need to look at how to professionally, integrate external services into our system. So we need to make sure that these things are in place so that when we now introduce the AI system, it rests on the shoulder of a backend system that is already secure. So next we have the production handling, which is like, okay, so since we have our business logic already in place, how do we make it faster? The normal production things that you would do for your backend, like adding caching, making some security updates and stuff, adding monitoring and observabilities, adding events so that you don't have to wait for things to, for your request for a very long time, and all these things that you normally do as a backend engineer. So all this has to already happen. You have to do this in tune that you want to introduce your AI system. And then under the AI infrastructure, this is where you now start integrating. Either you want to build rack system, or you want to build agents, or you want to look at embeddings and measuring the cost and everything. And then we have AI system, which you now introduce human in the loop. For example, if you want your AI system to ask for feedback from a human being before proceeding, so how do you integrate things like that? We see it when we are building Claude, when we are using Claude code. Sometimes, if we ask it to plan out a particular, feature and stuff, it's going to plan it out, and then it's going to ask us if it should proceed with writing the code and stuff. things like that. How do you integrate that into your AI system? And then you talk about memory so that you don't have memory leaks in the case that we had in the story that I was sharing with you. And then how do you actually integrate observability in your AI pipeline? This time, you're not talking about your backend pipeline. This is in your AI pipeline so that if you're incurring a high cost, you have an alert. If there is a problem with like a user is trying to abuse your system by sending in illegal prompts and all of that, you have an alert. So how do you integrate this observability system into your AI pipeline? So these are the things that this 6-layer framework actually covers. And then you talk about defense. So defense in this case is, do you know your system enough to answer a series of questions that might arise? So you notice that we have 7 questions that we have to ask ourselves, and then we have to answer those questions, right? So do you know your system enough to answer those questions true, right? To say, okay, we've implemented this, we've not implemented this yet, and all of that. So let's look at each of these layers. So the first one is foundation. One of the best questions that you would answer here is, can I build a real backend? So if you are to integrate an AI system into your backend system, can you actually build a backend system? Now, a real backend system, that's a production ready backend system. Aside from the whole AI bubble, integrating AI agents or integrating rack system, can you build a real backend system? What does it take to build a real backend system? So you have to answer that question under the foundation or under the layer one. So there are several things that you do in order to build a real backend system, but we've just listed out a few ones depending on our use case, right? So we have authentication. Here you have to properly manage authentication, which is login, log out, email verification and all of this. Session management. You have to be the backend engineer that knows how to do these things professionally. Because the foundation, like I said before, is the first layer of defense. If something is broken at that stage, then someone can get access to your AI system and then try to, maluse it or misuse the AI system that you've created. So the foundation is important. You have to know how to build a real world backend system. And I believe most of us here, or all of us here, already know how to handle a real backend system. So, of course, we have database migration. So, since you're now introducing AI workflow, of course, there would be different, schemas that you have to create, different relationships. For example, you might want to store the conversations that you're getting with from the AI. You might want to store the responses, different other things, right? So you have to know how to create proper database schemas, migrations, proper data modeling. So this is where database comes in. It's still important even in this AI era. So you have to know how to define relationships and all of that. Okay, input validation is very important. So this is where you can actually catch some of the illegal prompts that a user is typing in. So at this time, instead of doing the normal input validation, which is still going to be there because as a backend engineer, we do not trust any inputs that is coming from the user or externally. Okay, so you still do your input. For this time, you go a little bit deeper into actually validating the prompt and checking for nuances that is being accompanied with the prompt to make sure that you actually fish out those illegal prompts that you don't want to pass to your LLMs. And then, of course, you need to learn how to configure your environment. So you set your dev, staging, and prod environment because sometimes some of these LLMs gives us APIs that we can use separately for dev so that we don't incur much high cost while we are testing. So you need to learn how to separate this properly and do your secret management. Okay. So all these are things that as a normal backend engineer, you should already have good knowledge of. And then the next one is error handling. So you need to also go and learn how to create good retry mechanisms in case someone asks a question and the LLM has to retry again to get a better answer to that question. So you need to learn retry mechanism properly, not like the one that we did that actually helped us to incur much high cost. Okay, you need to learn retry mechanism properly and how to gracefully, resolve failures in case your system fails at any point in time. So there are a lot of things that needs to happen under the foundation depending on your use case, but we have just pointed this one because I believe as a backend engineer, you already know how to build, real world backend system. So this is important. The foundation is important because before you actually add AI, you need a foundation that actually works. You need a foundation that is secure. You need a foundation that your AI workflow can actually rest upon. Okay, next we have the business logic. In this point, you need to answer what the real product that you are building. Can I model a real business domain? So if you are building a mock interview platform, can you actually build a mock interview platform without AI? Okay, can you do that? What will be the actors of your system? Who will be the user? Who will be the candidate? Who will be the admin? All these things has to happen. So what will be the permission of the user? What will be the permission of the interviewer? All these things you have to actually outline them properly as a proper backend engineer. So here you introduce things like role-based access control, who can have access to AI features, who can have access to AI feature or who cannot. So you have to distinguish these things and make sure that your system is actually functional even without an AI, and then before you can then look at introducing AI into that system. So a functional backend system, of course, would come with a role-based access control. You have like queues that you need to pass for slow operations, okay? So in this time, you can say, okay, slow AI operations or other operations that might not relate to AI, like generating the results of the interview and all of this. So you can queue this, side of the job and then allow your events to run while your system is functional and is fast. So you need to learn how to do background jobs with queues. You need to learn how to use event systems. I think Node.js has a very good events API, and the same thing for other programming languages that you can leverage on to build systems that is fast and things are working in the background. Again, the next important thing is looking at how to integrate, external services properly. Okay, this is where real backend system actually comes in. This does not relate with any AI thing. This time, you're actually building the backend of your system. So how do you connect to maybe OpenAI, or if you need access to other external services, how do you connect to them? How do you integrate them properly? There are different patterns or design patterns that is used for external services. Do you know that pattern? Can you do it in a professional setting? You have to learn that. And then, of course, you need to integrate usage tracking. Like some system uses mixed panel to track what happens, what feature are users using more, or what are they not using more. You need to do all this tracking and build them into your system so that you understand how users are using your system, how much they are incurring and what is the cost and all of this. So this is backend itself. At this moment, you're not thinking of the AI that you're going to integrate. Okay. This point is where different courses about AI engineering and all of that, this is where they fall apart because they don't really teach you this backend thingy first before trying to integrate the AI system into it. But the bootcamp that we are hosting starts from the foundation. So we start from how do you set the foundation to be able to welcome your AI integrations. That is where we are starting from. And then we are teaching you how to professionally do role-based access control, backend jobs, how to integrate external system professionally, how to integrate usage tracking and other things that relates to backend system that is going to be useful if you have to integrate your AI into the system. 3 talks about production hardening. So under layer 2 here, you have defined your product. To understand your product, at that moment, users are able to see that your product works. But how do you survive real traffic? For example, let's say you have 1 million users and then you want to push your newly built mock interview platform to 1 million users. What are the things you are going to do in order to survive real traffic like that? So there is a lot of things that you definitely need to do. But here we just pointed out a few just to tell you that we are aware that there are lots of things that needs to happen, right? But the first one is caching. Of course, you need to cache a lot of things, not just AI responses. You need to cache a lot of things to save time and to save money. Because if you keep calling LLMs each time, even if it is the same response that you are expected to get, of course, that is going to increase your cost. So you need to implement caching in a production ready manner. And of course, you need to introduce security. Security in this case is very important. So you need to look at into the top 10 OAuth security tips and make sure that you integrate them professionally into your system. And the security in this case talks about prompt injection defense, race limiting, and of course, we know about input. All right, so of course, we talk about login. Here, we talk about you should log every request, every response, every token count and error. Everything should be fully traceable because it's going to happen that there will be errors that will happen on your production system. So you need to know where they are coming from and or who injected these errors and all of that. So you need to have idea of your request, your response, everything that is happening in your system so that you can fully trace it back to whoever you want to trace it to and know how to debug it immediately. So the next one is integrating monitoring, which is very important, of course. So there's a lot of other things that happens if you are targeting 1 million users to use your system, or if you are going to build for the next 1 million users. There is a lot of things that you need to do, and we are going to cover that in the bootcamp. So that is one of the things that we need to cover in the bootcamp. So these are just like tips to show you that, okay, before you integrate AI, these are the things that needs to actually happen as a backend engineer trying to level yourself up to AI engineering. So after layer 3, you actually have a better backend system. So this time there is no AI integrated, but you have just built a backend system that is actually 90% better than what other engineers will actually ship. So you build this out first, and then we'll start looking at using that knowledge that you have, building this out to now integrate AI to rest on the foundation that you already have as a production ready backend engineer. So layer 4 now is where we introduce the AI. Okay, so this time we are going to talk about a lot of things. We are going to start with the vector databases, RAG pipelines, AI agents, cost control, all of this, everything that an AI engineer is supposed to know. We are going to teach how to actually do them. So here, you're going to answer a very important question. Can I build an AI that scales? So you already know that you have a backend system that can scale up to 1 million users. That is real traffic, right? So how do you now integrate your AI workflows into this backend that you already have? And at the same time, with your integration, it still work as perfectly as the backend system that you have built. Okay, so it is not magic. We are going to start with, walking you through the foundations of building AI systems. So we talk about, different vector databases like Pinecone, QDrown, and all of this. And then we'll look at how can you build a proper RAG pipelines, okay? And all of these. And then we'll start building lots of AI agents with different guardrails and iteration limits so that you don't over cost yourself and all of that. So this is what layer 4 is talking about. The real AI system, this is where we build it. So this is where tutorials lie, because sometimes here they just quickly show you some demos without any real users. So you already build a backend system that is targeting 1 million users. So you're going to now integrate your AI system into this infrastructure that you have already laid, into the foundation that you have already laid. And that is how an AI backend engineer is supposed to operate. All right, so in layer 5, you're going to answer a very important question also. Can I make the AI that I have already built? Because in layer 4, you would either build a rack pipeline system or you build an AI agent. You build one of these, right? Now, how can you make the AI that you've built, that system that you've built, how can you make it safe and how can you make it maintainable? So that is where different strategies comes into play, like human in the loop. Okay, I want to allow my AI to always ask human to make verification, or I want to ask human for feedback on what I am doing before I can continue. So that is where human in the loop comes into play. And then we look at how to properly manage memory so that you don't run leaks and all of that. And then we talk about context windows, summarization, and long conversations. How do we deal with things like this? So how do we deal with context windows? You can see this in Claude Code when you give it context, and then it gives you a proper response because it now has better context. So we are going to look at how to create our own AI system that has context, and you can also give context to. Okay, for example, the mock interview platform that we are building, you notice that when the user comes with a job description, the AI knows has to stay within this job description. Okay, so that is context already. It has to stay within this job description. All the questions that is going to be asking, the conversations that is going to be having would fully be focused on this job description. Okay, and then we look at AI observability. So I mentioned this before. The observabilities that you have on your backend system is actually different from the one that you have on your AI system. So we start with, from when you send in your prompt, the retrieval, the response that you get from your AI or your agent, all of that, the time it takes for that response to come in, or for the user to actually get the response, all these are going to be traced, and you're going to learn how to actually put observability within these different stages. All right. And again, hallucination can be a very big problem, and there are different ways to actually cope this problem. Okay, so we are going to actually try to verify claims. So one of the best way to do this is to have another agent that fact checks whatever this other agent is, coming up with. For example, in our mock interview platform, the way we solve as hallucination was this. So we have this agent that generates questions, right? And then we have this other agent that checks the question to make sure that is in line with the job description, and also with lots of mastering backends data that we've already passed in. And then if there is a go ahead and we pass that question to our text to speech model, which actually speaks out the question for the user to hear it. Okay, so that's one of the ways that we solve the hallucination problem, but there are many ways. So we are going to look at different ways that you can solve hallucination depending on your use cases. Okay, so most AI actually fails here. This layer 5 is most backend engineers actually fail because they treat their AI system as autonomous. Okay, so it knows exactly what to do. It has like the control and stuff, but they need to actually understand that this is still the AI at stage is still at a very early stage. We still need to allow humans to review the outputs that the AI is generating before we can send it out to our customers, right? So this is where like the human in the loop strategy actually comes in, and many other strategies that we can employ to make sure that the outputs that is sent to our customers are actually very safe. Under defense, we are going to ask you, because in the bootcamp, you're going to actually build a system depending on a capstone project, maybe a mock interview platform or whatever system that you want to build. So you're going to be able to answer lots of these questions, right? So why did you choose this embedding model? What happens when vector search returns nothing? How do you handle these scenarios? What do you tell the user? How do you present it to the user and stuff like that? How do you prevent, prompt injection? What are the systems? What are the mechanisms you are putting in place to prevent these issues from happening? How do you know if your AI or your LLMs is hallucinating. What is the result that you expected versus what you are actually getting from the LLMs? So you are going to be able to defend these questions, show us from the code that you've written, the products that you've built, how you are handling cases like this. So what's your strategy for handling rate limiting? So how many times can a user prompt your AI? How many times can your user actually call your LLMs or your agents and stuff like this? So you need to put these things in place, and you should be able to show us what you've done and how you've done this in a production ready manner. So there will be a walkthrough from start to finish, you defending yourself in the bootcamp to make sure that the certification that we are giving to you is actually what you said that you've done. So there's this stuff that I always have at the back of my mind. If you can't defend your system, if you are building a backend system and you cannot defend it, you cannot answer questions that may arise from the systems that you have built, that simply means that you don't understand it. Maybe you just build it out of whatever. You don't really understand it. You can't really maintain the system that you have built if you do not understand it. So that is the defense layer. It doesn't have anything to do with AI integrations or backend integrations, but it is a single most important one, because this time you're going to talk to us, you're going to defend what you have built, and we are going to make sure that you are doing it the right way. So in the live demo, we are supposed to build a very quick rack system that actually integrates these 6 layers. But I'm going to show you how some persons would do it and then how you should do it. All right. So the rack system is a document QA system. You upload docs, you ask questions, you get an AI answer, and all of that with sources. So basically, if you are to approach this just coming out from a course, right? You've just seen a particular course or you've watched through a tutorial and stuff. This is how you would do it. So first of all, you have open AI embeddings, and then you create, like your question and stuff. And then you have Pinecone, which is one of the vectors databases and stuff, and then you query whatever question that you have based on, then you get a response, right? And then you map that response, you send it to your chat GPT or any model that you have, to give you a response based on whatever questions that was asked. And then you, of course, get the contents and the response and send it to the user. So normally, if you look at this is going to work. This is your first rack system, because here you have your Pinecone that basically have access to your, document that you've stored on the rack system. Okay, so it's going to give you a response. But this response, what happens if something goes wrong? You'll notice that a lot could happen here. A vector search could return null. The result could be empty. OpenAI could return a different response, right? A lot of things could go wrong in these settings, and you just allow your users to suffer through it. So this is how most tutorials handles this, because they just want you to understand how to call APIs. They just want you to know how these things works. But if you are to build a system that 1 million people are going to use, you have to do it properly. You have to do it in a production manner. And that is what we are going to actually deep dive into this bootcamp. So things that could go wrong here is that anyone at all can access this code. There is no authentication, no authorization, no role-based access, right? Anybody can access this code, provided that this code is made public. So no error handling at all. If there is any problem at any instance, you have crashes, you have timeout, you have lots of errors being sent to the user. So there is no cost tracking here. Surprisingly, the user can ask a question that will result in repetition or retries, and you notice that you incur lots of costs. This is exactly what happens to us in our mock interview platform that we try to build. So again, no caching, no validation, no observability, nothing happened. You are just calling out APIs directly. Okay, this works, but this will not work well in a production settings. So how will you handle this in a production settings? Let's take a look at it. So if we have the same rack system to create, first of all, we'll have to do authentication. We have to like check if the user that is asking this question is actually authenticated. If there is, a level of trust that this person is in our platform, this person is a registered user and stuff like that. And again, we need to do validation and sanitization, right? So the question that this user is asking, does it contain any invalid input or any illegal prompt or whatever? So we need to check all that and make sure that it is safe or it is clean. So once that happens, we now move down to checking the permission of the user, if the user has the permission to actually make this call or not. And then we also check the budget. For example, if we want to make sure that for a user to get response, the user has to be a paid user, the user has to be in one of our paid plans. We also have to check that. That is where the check budget comes in to make sure that we are sure that this user is, a paid subscriber and is able to ask this question. So once we successfully pass through these barriers, we then move down to caching. First of all, we check that the question that the user is asking is not in our cache bucket already. So if it is there, there is no need, calling our rack system. There's no need calling our agents. We just simply just return the cached results. But if everything being equal, then we go directly to our rack query. So here we now integrate these things where, okay, we check through vector search to make sure that it gets the relevant documents that we have stored on our search. And then we use that combination of the document and the question and then push it to our LLM so that it returns to us a better result. So once that is true, we then move down to observability. So where we kind of log everything to make sure that there is no problem at all. So we actually also check the confidence level to make sure that the results that we are getting has a max confidence level. If not, we add that to queue for review. So we do all this to make sure that our system is safe and it has the 6-layer approach that we have just discussed, and it is also production ready and is suitable for a large number of persons to use without us worrying about hallucinations. Okay, so the rack system that we built, which is this, is like the flow for it. User asks a question, we get, we generate embeddings, convert it to a vector, and then we do a vector search. Vector search at this stage just checks our database to see that all the documents that we've added to that database, this question either relates to it or it doesn't relate to it. And then we find something, we use that thing that we find to build context. We combine the relevant chunks together, and then we send it to our LLM. So LLMs here could be ChatGPT, it could be Grok, it could be Claude, anyone at all, and then we get the result. So once we get the result, we make sure that we check it again with our reviewer. So our reviewer in this case is another agent that reviews whatever these first agents here returns to make sure that it includes the original sources, it has good confidence, and it is exactly what we expect before we return it to the user. Okay, this is how we prevent hallucination. This is how we also make sure that we prevent high cost and every other thing that could go wrong in our backend system. Okay, as a recap, the foundation basically just talks about the normal foundation that you would have as a backend engineer building a backend system. The same thing for the business logic. So this basically just integrates the business logic of the product that you are building. Okay, and then production handling talks about the extra step that you have to go to make sure that your system that you've built is able to serve up to 1 million users for a start, right? And then you start looking at integrating your AI system into the workflow. And then your AI system now has to be confident, has to be safe, has to be maintainable. So you introduce human in the loop, memory, and observability, and all these different things to make sure that your AI system is safe. So once you're able to build this out, at this moment, with the knowledge that you have, you should be able to defend your system and explain every decision that you have to make. So you see the reason why it is important to follow this layer step by step and build out your system accordingly. Okay, so this is exactly what we are going to do in the bootcamp that is coming. So we are going to make sure that we follow these in this to build out the systems. So, like I said, right now and up to like I think 7 hours now, the bootcamp is on a discount. So if you go to masteringai.dev, you're going to see the discount rate. It's going to depend on, of course, where you're coming from. And you can see from here, these are the early birds discounts right now. So this is time for Q&A, and I would really love you guys to ask questions to the bootcamp, question relating to what we've just talked about, anything at all relating to AI that you feel like you want to ask. I am available to answer any question. Thank you very much for your audience, and I really appreciate. Just to add, this is the first workshop that we are going to be having. This is just introduces the 6 layers that every backend system needs. In the next one, we are going to have another speaker that is going to actually build out something based on his experience and then show us how to integrate this. I'll be listening to questions from you guys, and yeah, who wants to go first?
Hello, sir. Can I speak?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So, what my question is that can you just brief us about how the curriculum of the bootcamp would be? How many classes every week we will be having that?
All
Can you
right.
brief? Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that. I actually wanted to have questions that relates to the workshop before we dive into the bootcamp proper. But since this question is here, I'm just going to answer directly. So the bootcamp is in 6 weeks, right? So I want the bootcamp to be every day, 1 hour every day. The reason for this is because we are actually going to build a real system from scratch. You are going to watch me build a mock interview platform using AI from scratch. So every decision, we are going to do it together in the live bootcamp. So I want it to be 1 hour every day, except of course weekends. Okay. So every day for the 6 weeks so that it gives us enough time to actually finish up the curriculum. So the curriculum is 6 weeks. Each day we have a class, 1 hour each day. We talk about everything. So if you go to the website, you can see where you download the full curriculum. That breaks down each lessons that is going to happen. But I am also going to send that with the email I'm going to send out for this particular workshop here. That is going to contain like where you can download the curriculum from. But that is how it is. It is 6 weeks. Each week we have 5 classes, 1 hour every day, and it's going to be after work hours so that people can relax and be in the class. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it was right.
Thank you very much. So I have another question here. We pay on 2 installments. Yes, you can. You just have to DM me so that we create a plan for you. This is my email here, mastering backend. So if you DM me on this, we can discuss it and then. Okay, so if you can't speak, you can send your question through the chat. I am on the chat right now and I'm responding to questions there. So, what time zone the live session will take place? So, we are going to use UTC. So, this particular workshop here starts at 4 p.m. UTC. So, for us is 5 p.m. So, I don't know what the time would be for you guys, but we are going to use UTC, which is like the universal time. So, it's always going to be 4 p.m. UTC. So you can convert that to your own time and see what time it is for you. So that is for Hector that asked that particular question. So Adeyemi, go ahead. You raise your hand. All right. So I don't know if you still have a question. So if you have other questions, please go ahead. What date is the bootcamp starting? All right. So the bootcamp, we are looking at it starting mid March, mid-March, excuse me. So we are looking at it starting mid-March, but it depends, right? Because I really want the bootcamp to be very, very packed. Okay. So my team, we are preparing everything to make sure that the bootcamp is excellent in delivery, in content, in timing. So it can drop from mid-March to 1st of April, but we are not sure of that date. But right now, what we are sure of is mid-March. So we are working with mid-March, but depending on the time that we're able to prepare all the contents for the bootcamp. All right. So since you're already on the wait list, there is already an email sequence that is coming in that is going to help you understand the progress of the bootcamp. But I believe that you can start now to make payment because after the 8 hours, the early birds are actually going to stop and the prices are going to go way up. So you can actually imagine the amount that is going to go up too. So I want to urge you guys to actually start making payments. So you've already seen the breakdown of the things that we are going to cover in the bootcamp. So what I've talked to you guys about today is exactly what we are going to cover. But now in the bootcamp, we are going to do it practically. Do you understand? So instead of me telling you how you need to handle this and stuff, I'm going to show you how I handled the product that I am building, so that you actually have idea from my experience and be able to build your own from there. So I have a lot of other questions that I have to attend to. Okay, Carl said he needs to drop. All right, so the recordings, actually, I'm going to send it to you guys. I just wanted you guys to stay to the end. That's why I had to say that there won't be no recording. Okay, so when having something like caching a user's resume, how do we cache a large content like that? So in this case, right, the vector database is where we store. If you are building a rack system, there are different places that you store. What you actually cache is the response that you get. So if someone asks a questions like, what is the refund policy for mastering backend? That question is definitely going to have the same answer each time, except the user add something else, right? So in this case, since we always have the same question, there is no need trying to call or trying to go through the process again of checking our vector database to make sure that we get the right refund policy from mastering backend, and then calling OpenAI or whatever, calling our agents to get the right way to present the answer for you and stuff like that. So instead of repeating that process, we can just get the cached response that was already stored for that question and send it to the user, because that question is always going to give the same response, except maybe the user adds something else. Okay. So that is where caching actually comes in. But caching your large resume, I think vector databases already have an extended capabilities to actually search their databases in real time and really, really fast, that you do not need to cache your entire resume at this stage. Okay. So don't query the LLM every time. So you're actually correct at the last time. The question that is again. So, like I said, for us to activate 2 installments, this is for Kuma. Please, you can reach out to me. I've shared my emails. I don't think it's difficult. Just reach out to me. I will create a personal call for you that you can use for the installments. Do you understand? Just reach out to someone at masteringbackend.com. So the system that we have right now cannot allow us to automate the process of installments, okay? But if you want to go through the installment route, just reach out to me directly. All right, so that's for Kuma. I don't know if that answers your question. The next one is ExpressJS a must-know requirement for the bootcamp. And I'm asking because I never written Express. No, so language is not important in this case. So as you see the way I walk you guys through, the different layers, I never mentioned anything with programming languages. So that is the same thing that is going to happen in the bootcamp itself. It is not language specific. The idea is the patterns and the layers that we are going to talk about, you can implement that in your languages, right? I am only going to show examples with the language I am familiar with, but I am going to talk to you as someone that is implementing it in different languages. So that is for the next question is how long will it last? So it is 6 weeks every day. I want us to lock down for these 6 weeks and really, really learn AI engineering, right? Let's lock down for these 6 weeks and really learn AI engineering, not as someone that is watching courses. I've already showed you like the differences between the bootcamp and someone that is, watching courses. You see the differences. I want us to lock down, lock in, and actually learn what it really takes to become an AI backend engineer. So it's 6 weeks. That is for Mahamadu. Sorry for your name, please. I can't pronounce that correctly. So, what is the language stack one needs to know coming to this bootcamp? All right. So, you need to know at least one, you need to be a backend engineer. So, I don't know the language that you use for backend development, but you actually need to be a backend engineer, or you need to understand backend engineering systems and principles, right? So if you're a data science or whatever, you can still join the bootcamp, but we are going to be using backend engineering patterns to teach. Do you understand? So if you have a problem while we are teaching, you can, ask questions, and then we are going to say, okay, you're a data engineering person. Okay, we are going to now break it down for you to understand in your own terms. So if you're asking me for language stack, I would just say be a backend engineer with any language at all, whether it's Python, whether it's Rust, whether it's Node.js. So the next question, I'm a scenario where I am building a resume reviewing system. I already have responses from the last time a user queried the system. Now a user is retrying again. The same user, how will I know if the content of the resume has changed? Okay. Or if I don't cache that large content. Okay, so I think this is a problem of cache invalidation strategy, right? So if at some point you change the content of the resume, you have to invalidate the cache that you have already stored for resume responses. And when that happens, the new response or the new request that the user is sending is going to go direct to LLMs and it's going to pass through your rack systems and all of that. But if you are not able to invalidate the cache properly, that is where you now have stall results. So I don't know if that answers your question. So this is mainly a problem of cache invalidation. So are they in your hands? Are still up? Do you have another question?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Sorry for the other time. I was using a different browser, so I could not, the microphone was not working. I had to use a different browser. Thank you for this session. Thank you for your time. Yes, the reason why I showed interest in bootcamp is that sometimes last year, someone reached out to me that they want to build an AI layer on their product, right? So I have not done any before, just something like I try doing myself, not on a production level, right? So based on my research, of course, using ChatGPT, I'm a PHP backend developer, Laravel. So based on my research, I got something which is called Prism, right? Prism is used to structure your responses. So when I got your post on LinkedIn, I was seeing RAG and every other technology used. So I was confused, and I'm still confused because based on my research, and I was trying to build for the client, the AI was using did not even go far to that extent, using all of the technology you have mentioned. So, what am I missing, or what is the AI missing? Because AI is just giving me.
Sorry, I'm trying to mute this person.
Okay,
Right, go ahead.
okay, thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
So, I want to know what I am missing or what the AI is missing. And the technologies that you have mentioned so far, are they all important to build an AI, layer on the product? Because this
Okay.
all of this were not shown to me. Thank you.
All right. So, I mean, like the first question, if all the technologies that I've listed are important, first, they are not important depending on the products you're building. So, your product use case will determine if you need a rack system or not, or if you will just build an AI agent. Do you understand? So, but as an AI engineer, you are not limited to the type of products that you need to build or that you can build. So that's the reason why you need to understand how these different, technologies that I've mentioned relate to each other. So if you're building a rack system, that means the product you're building needs an internal information. Okay, for example, if you're building a Q&A product for a business, a user comes in, asks this chat box or whatever a question, and the answer should relate to what the company is doing or the business or whatever. In that scenario, you need a rack system because ChatGPT or Claude would not know what this particular business is doing. So you need a rack system to be able to have the information and documents of this company. So you need a rack system in that case. But some cases, you don't need a rack system. Maybe you are building a quiz application that endlessly generate quizzes for the user to keep answering. So in that case, you don't need a rack system. You just need to tell your agent that this user is going to continuously ask you, answer question, always generate quizzes that relates to the topic that this user is taking. And you see the agent, generating the quizzes each time. So you don't really need a rack system in that case. So it depends exactly on the product that you are building and who you are building it for. That is when you need either you need rack or you need just to build agents and stuff like that. And at the same time, I did not mention MCP. It's one of the things that we are going to be learning in the bootcamp. So MCPs are there. If you want to connect, if you want AI to actually know how to use your system, your product, your APIs, then you need MCP, right? So you need to know the context and the type of things that you need to build so that you identify what you need for that product. But like I said before, as an AI engineer, you definitely need to know all these things and how to build them so that you don't, lag behind if someone needs to build something that relates to what you don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Well, can I ask a question again based on my experience? Now, something I've experienced recently, and I would love to get a clarity before I commit myself to this bootcamp. So the
All
question
right.
is that the product is actually related to like logistics, right? And
Mhm.
the founder wanted an AI system that could suggest the fastest routes using Google Map API and using AI. The AI is going to suggest the fastest route using the API. It is going to check if there's a traffic here, there's traffic here, and all of that, right? So, do you think all of the technologies you have mentioned, or the basic one I I saw based on my findings, is okay?
So in that case, right, I think first of all, you need to have an API that fetches all these routes, right?
Mm.
So you have an API that fetches all these routes, either from Google Map or whatever, but you need to have a way to get all these routes, right? And then based on the information from these routes that we've fetched, we can determine if this one is the fastest or not. Okay. And in that case, right, I think for us to be able to connect and for AI to know all the routes that we have and then decide which one is the fastest, I think in that case, we need an MCP. Do you understand? So an MCP to fetch these routes and send it to AI, or we can just fetch this route from our normal and then use these routes, the data, just the raw text data, right? And then feed it to our AI. And then the AI, based on the information from each route, maybe there is additional information from Google Map or wherever, the AI can then determine which route is like the fastest from the information from we have in each of these routes. So I think that is the two approach that we can take to be able to ask AI the right information and get the right result. Because first of all, if we just have agents, right? And then we send this information, any information to this agent, the agent will not know exactly the routes that we are talking about, right? So we need to make sure that we have the routes ready and all the informations that relates to this route. And then we use that information and feed it to this AI somehow, whether we are sending it as a text or we are allowing the AI itself to call our MCP server to get this route by itself. These are the two ways. But somehow we need to feed the routes to this AI for it to be able to come up with the best result for us. So I would say if you are taking the first one where your code fetches the route itself, I think just building an agent is okay. But if you are going through the route where the agent fetches the route by itself using MCP, I think building an MCP for your product is also okay. All right. So I wanted this workshop, this first one, to be 1 hour straight, and we've already, deep into 30 minutes and 7 minutes. So do we have any other question? And if not, we are going to say thank you very much for joining. And please, if you have any issue making payments, you have my email address already. It is solomon@masterinbackend.com. Just send me an email and it will be resolved immediately. If you want to ask for, split payment, you can also do the same. And if there is no other question, I'm going to see you on the next workshop. And again, I'm going to see you guys in the bootcamp. So thank you very much for joining this one, and cheers.